Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to look at some news that's coming off of Mallrats 2. Now, last we heard Kevin Smith was in the middle of writing the script. He is also in the process of writing the script for Clerks 3. Mallrats 2 is going to be called Twilight of the Mallrats. And Smith has already stated that the film is going to center around kind of the decline and death of mall culture, which really the first one kind of ripped, because it was back in '95 when mall culture was kind of a huge thing. So moving forward from that, we now got today's news. Now this is, I think this is a bad decision by Smith. And maybe not for some of the reasons why people might criticize him for, but I think ultimately this is a bad, both kind of a bad moral decision and a bad business decision. And he does give some response to his argument, but let's just kind of go into it. So Kevin Smith wants to incorporate a pandemic, or more specific, well, I don't know if he is actually going to say coronavirus in the film, but he wants to incorporate a pandemic into the film to kind of be the death nail for malls. Because it's kind of what's happening in the United States already, where malls have been on the decline for the last 10 years, and now they are kind of becoming obsolete because people can just order everything online for the most part. So now that that is kind of, taking its toll basically, and it's happening as we speak, Smith wants to incorporate that specific element into his film, which is slated, I don't know if it has an actual slated release date as of yet. I don't think it does. But being the fact that the script appears to be somewhat finished, or is in the process of being finished, whenever he finishes that script, they're probably going to be able to greenlight it because of what he did with Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, which I still need to see. But the thing is that there's two problems with this decision. Now, the first one is kind of obvious, which is you're putting out a video. Sorry, not a video. You're putting out a movie only a year or two after what's happened with the coronavirus, and if he directly uses the word coronavirus, that would be like worst case scenario. Like he puts that in the script. That would be the worst case scenario. If he uses a pandemic, I think it would still be kind of a little weird. I think that's something that Hollywood's going to stay away from for a while. But I'm going to read the entire statement that he gave, or the entire quote from him, on what he's been doing with Mallrats 2, and then we'll kind of go into a little bit more on that explanation after you kind of hear the whole soundbite, or hear the whole message in one chunk. So, Kevin Smith was quoted as saying, "I was working on Twilight of the Mallrats 2 script, and so I had just read last night articles about the retail apocalypse, where 2020 was going to be the death nail for a bunch of stores anyway. But the pandemic has escalated that, made it worse, and we're about to see a lot of big box stores, big name stores that you and I have known for most of our lives just go away forever. That means massive vacancies in malls, so they're predicting the implosion, the entire implosion of malls. I mean, they were really already teetering, but the entire implosion of malls across America. So as a guy who's writing a movie set in a mall, I'm like, well, that's useful information for my line of work. So I had to start writing the pandemic into the movie, because clearly this is going to be remembered for all time. It's not like, oh, why would you make that so topical? The coronavirus happened last year. You'll still be hearing corona-related stories and plot lines and drops from the next 5 to 10 years the same way post-September 11th. That was everywhere." And that is the end of the quote. So Smith does defend his decision a little bit at the end there by saying that, this is a major basically that it's a major historical event, and if you incorporate it into the film, it means that people will know about it. It's something that a lot of people will know about after the fact. Again, he relates it back to September 11th, which I think is a little, both are tragedies, but it's kind of, it's a different type of tragedy. It's a tragedy that happened because people deliberately tried to do something. Now, whether anybody deliberately tried to do something with the coronavirus, nothing is proven. That's the whole thing I'm saying. It's like, we know September 11th was deliberate. that's one of those things like you knew it was deliberate. It wasn't just somebody, it wasn't just a pilot error. At the point, when people were actually watching on television when it was actually happening. This is obviously a completely different scenario where this is dragging on for, that was one day, and this is dragging on for weeks, months, and a lot more people are dying because of this. And again, it's not something that's really intentional. It's a virus. So it's a little bit different. And the other thing is, I don't know really what he's talking about in terms of post September 11th, where they saw a bunch of stories and plot lines that were kind of related to that. Uh, I think that really a lot of when I remember back to the early 2000s, especially that 5 year period, which is what he's mentioning here, is the 5 to 10 years. I think actually the Twin Towers movie with Nick Cage, I think that came out in like 2010 or 2011, which would have been 10 years after it was, and even that was kind of like, okay, and nobody really watched it. But nobody's really made an attempt, for the most part, to do a movie specifically about September 11th, the actual attacks and the falling of the Twin Towers, and they haven't done that for a reason, because they know they don't want to piss people off, because a lot of people lost loved ones when that happened, and if he incorporates this virus into the story directly, I think that's just going to turn a lot of people off, and it's going to wind up hurting this film. And yeah, it might give it a little bit of longevity, but it's one of those situations. You look back at, this is kind of a personal one for me because I'm just listing this, but Patriots Day, the movie with Mark Wahlberg, you look back at that, and it's like nobody looks back. Nobody looks back at that movie today. I believe it came out in 2015, 2016, somewhere in that time frame, and the actual attacks took place in 2013. So looking back on it now, that movie doesn't have any irrelevance because I always remember, but a lot of people always remember it as, oh, that's the movie they made about the Boston Marathon bombings, just a couple years after it happened. Everybody looks at that and then they roll their eyes and you're like, Hollywood has no shame. That is what your movie is going to be if you try to include a lot of these plot lines. Now, the thing is, again, worst case scenario is he actually uses the word coronavirus in the film and in the dialogue. That will sink this movie 100% from start to finish, and people will be very, very pissed at Kevin Smith. And then you look at the other end of it, which is the business aspect, and because you're pissing off people, the movie is going to probably suffer for that. But the thing is that I feel, because this is the main thing. The hardcore Kevin Smith people are still going to go see the movie no matter what. Again, they're people that it doesn't matter what he makes, they'll go see it, even in his shit days of stuff like Yoga Hosers and Tusk and crap like that. He still sits through. They'll still sit through any of his movies, no matter how bad they are or how good they are. And there is a pretty large scale with Kevin Smith movies. But the problem is that he's coming off the success of Jay and Silent Bob reboot, at least the success from most of his fan base, and he wants to do the same thing with Mallrats 2 and eventually Clerks 3 that he did with that, where it's kind of a touring thing with him and Jason Mewes, and probably whoever else wants to go with them for the tour, whoever's going to be in the movie and star in it along with them. You could do that again, but again, the problem is that I feel like every city you're going to go to, there's going to be people there that are going to say "fuck you" for doing this. It's not a good look in the long run, and I hope he kind of edits that out of the script, and I hope people kind of talk him out of it. His wife or his daughter or somebody, kind of talks him out of doing that, because it's not a smart move. It's not a good move. Keep with what you know. Have them all just go out of business financially or something like that, since that was what was probably going to happen to most of them anyway. Just have that happen instead of doing this whole pandemic plot line, because it doesn't make it pertinent. It comes off as stupid, especially because you're putting it in a comedy. That actually makes it a little bit worse too. The fact that you're putting it in a comedy. Again, you very rarely can you get away with that type of shit. Maybe there's like a handful of examples that probably exist of that, but again, you have to be to get away with it completely. You have to kind of distance yourself enough from it and change enough of it that people don't immediately associate it with the thing that it's making fun of. But again, that's just kind of the new, an interesting little piece of news for the day. But I want to know what you think. Do you think that it's smart for Kevin Smith to put that in the movie? Do you think he's right in the fact that it will give the movie some longevity? In years past, that people will kind of look at the movie and like remember that major event, or do you think, like I do, that it's kind of a crappy moral decision and a pretty bad business decision too? Again, put your thoughts in the comments below. I like to read them. Hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?